Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Better Way of Life. We're back once again. Hello, and welcome to your Friday. It's the Friday feeling that you always needed. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad at all. Um, do you know what I spent last weekend doing? No idea. I'll tell you. I spent last weekend gardening.
I was going to say gardening. I thought it might be gardening.
Okay, but not my garden. Well, a bit of my garden or a bit of our garden, but actually mainly my son and his partner's garden
Oh.
because they just moved into a new house. They got the keys on the Friday, last Friday, and then it's the first time I've had a look at it. It was an absolute mess.
Oh,
Uh,
my garden.
no. Seriously, it almost looked like someone had committed, you know, atrocities in the garden. And to make matters worse, there was a massive like tarpaulin or several tarpaulins like pulled over where they like done something, and then there were like mounds which looked like burial mounds. And then as we were clearing up the garden, we found various instruments like pickaxes and
Oh,
you know other sharp objects and whatever. It's all quite spooky, really.
wow.
But there
My
we go.
weekend my weekend wasn't as exciting as that. I was helping at a coffee morning. So
Oh, that's lovely. There we go. What were you doing last weekend, folks? What are you going to do this weekend? It's Friday now, so do let us know. What is it that you're up to this weekend? And I hope it's a lovely weekend weather-wise. It was certainly last weekend. It was very nice
never
indeed.
know at the moment though, because it's so changeable.
It's
We
incredibly
just talked into
changeable.
our guest just now about that. It's best. You wake up one day and you're like, oh, I had shorts on yesterday, and now I'm back to jumpers again.
Yeah, no, that is the thing, and we literally just got back from France as well, where it was 10 degrees warmer, so it was all a bit of a shock
Shock.
to the system, as it were. There you go. Um, I'm going to be honest with people now. We're recording this. By the time this goes out, I will have been in London. I will have seen you, and there we are.
In the flesh,
Uh,
like real.
and there may actually be photographic evidence of all of that. But yeah, no, seriously, of course, this is almost live on a Friday. Hope you're enjoying it. We've got a special guest today. We're going to introduce the guest now. This is Jodie. I've never met Jodie before. You have. You've met
I've
Jodie before.
spoken to her, yes. So
You've
Jodie,
spoken to Jodie.
I was going to say she hunted me down. No, she
She
one of
hunted you down.
she did something that a lot of people don't actually do on LinkedIn all that much, and I've had a bit of a bugbear with it actually. But it's
Go on
something
then.
that well, when I said about giving and taking a while ago, it's how many people put content out there that don't actually respond to other people's content either. And I do my best work when I'm in bed normally. That's when I do quite a lot of my reading. And I do read people's posts and I do interact, but I'm acutely aware of the fact that I know people say quite often that the algorithm doesn't let them, but I don't necessarily fully believe that. But no, Jodie actually had read and followed some of my content and
Very
contacted
nice.
me for a chat to ask about training and furthering things. So it's really lovely.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. No, it's absolutely true. A lot of people just well, a lot of people in LinkedIn. We'll probably moan about LinkedIn at some point during the whole of this conversation. I'm absolutely certain
We
of it.
already have this morning. We already have.
We already have this morning. We have seen some atrocities this morning on the beautiful LinkedIn. LinkedIn, it's not your fault, but there are some people out there that really should know better. Let's meet Jodie. Let's find out a little bit more about Jodie and what Jodie does. Jodie, thanks for joining us.
You should hear us.
I don't know. Can you
Hi
hear us?
guys.
Can you hear us? Okay. Is there a delay? I don't know.
It might be.
Ah, Jodie, are you hearing us? Okay.
I don't think she is. No.
No. Let's just see if we can fix that. Hold on, I'm going to press the magic. I think we fixed that. You can hear me now.
I can hear you now and see you. I could just see before.
It's a wonderful thing, the pause button. It's a wonderful thing that it is. It lets you pause reality, and then you can come back when you've all got it sorted out. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
That was lovely that you met Marianne on the LinkedIn, and then you commented, and then you got to know each other. That's a lovely thing. What is it you do?
So I am a clinical educator. So I'm a physiotherapist by background and moved into a clinical education role. And I teach and specialise in tracheostomy care and management. So quite a niche little area.
Whoa, that is niche. That's niche and a half. Right. So you're talking about all this.
Yes.
Yeah. And like where it gets cut and all of that. And then, so how do you start getting into that? Presumably have you actually performed tracheotomies in the past, or you? No. Okay.
I can teach somebody to do it, but I'm not allowed to do it myself clinically. I'd probably give it a good go. I'm not gonna lie. I think I've got the right spot, but actual clinical practice is normally done by a consultant, so I tend to teach them how to do it.
Oh wow.
Am I right in thinking this is one of these procedures as well, right? Which quite often gets segued into medical dramas, right? Because with am I right? I was going to say with one of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Glorified with a pen, and I tend to make a joke during my training session. Don't worry, we're not going to practice cricothyroidotomies today because I'll have my best Parker pen at home. Tends to go down well. Nice icebreaker.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So what if you did ever have to use no one do this at home, right? Nobody do this at home. But if you did have to use a pen, the pen has to have the innards taken out, right? So it's like a breathing tube. Is that correct? Just like this one that I've actually generated for the purpose of this whole conversation.
Here's one you made earlier.
This is my Blue Peter pen for this conversation. Yeah.
You're ready to go. All you need now is a butter knife, and you're good.
A butter knife.
I'm joking.
My butter knife
much sharper than that.
So blunt, it's unreal. Right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Something sharper than that. So as sharper instrument as possible.
Yes.
Preferably a scalpel, presumably, and then one of those. And obviously, years of medical training and actually knowing what you're doing as well would come in really handy. What's the I'm just fascinated by anything medical like this. What are the risks if someone gets it wrong?
There can be quite a few things. So you can damage the tracheal rings, and that then can obviously be quite uncomfortable for the patient and cause issues further down the line with like scar tissue and things like that. The higher up we start to kind of move, so your cricothyroidotomy is where you put in your pen as to say it's really quite high up, so then we can start to cause trauma to the first tracheal rings, your vocal folds, your larynx, or your swallow, so it can have huge impacts not just on you anatomically, but also how you function, eating, drinking, talking, all those few things that we take for granted can have a massively detrimental impact if it's done wrong.
Goodness me. Some people watching this would probably say, well, they wish that had happened to me. But that's everyone's got their own opinion. So how did you get into that? Because that's, as you say, it is really quite niche.
It is. I kind of fell into it. Like all the best things, I think, you just kind of fall into something like this. So I had, when I was working clinically, a patient who I really struggled to discharge home. I really struggled to have the clinical support in the hospital to point me in the right direction of, this is what we need to do. This is the steps to get this patient home safely. And here's the things that you're going to need to know, because I did a lot of like learning on the fly. Google was a great resource at that point in time. And there just wasn't anybody to help me. It just came at an unfortunate time. There were people available, but they were either off sick or unreachable or whatever it be. So it was kind of just, I got offered a job opportunity that was, this is the job role, what do you think? And it started off being a tracheostomy development specialist within the community. So I was like, well, this is a great opportunity. You know, I could be the person that I needed somebody to point me in the right direction. So yeah, let's go and kind of understand all of this. And it just kind of escalated from there, really. The company I worked for were amazingly supportive, and they listened to ideas. They kind of understood areas of growth and, you know, what we could do to try and support that. And yeah, as the years progressed, we were bought out by another company, and they had a clinical education team, and I kind of moved full time into the clinical side of things, and not half and half split between clinical and sales. So I'm quite glad to see that side gone and moving into that clinical side now. I'm really focusing on that. So, and then that leads me to here today, still finding the same things in the community, and the holes, the gaps, the needs, the wants, and still fighting the good fight.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. Well, it's lovely to meet you. Now, the thing is, you obviously saw what Marianne was putting out there on LinkedIn, etc. What was it that caught your eye?
I see a lot of, I think the big thing is how she describes training. Let's super boost your training. And at this point in time, you know, being a clinical educator, it's the question I'm asking myself at the minute is, how do I know that somebody's learned something? And particularly in the clinical profession, yes, if I've learned something, but how do I then go and implement that change? How does that, you know, shape the future and change my practice to be better, or to understand more, or, you know, to change something that may have been doing wrong. And actually now, because I've had some training education, I want to kind of do that right, make sure I'm doing that right clinical practice moving forward. So I really wanted to reach out to kind of understand how I could make the training that I'm delivering better, more engaging, and how could I monitor, you know, all the things that I've just kind of spoke about.
Oh,
Because you did your AET during COVID, I think, didn't you? Right?
Yes, that was the other thing. Yeah, so I did my AET, and it was the biggest assignment I've ever written. That was including my qualification to be a physiotherapist. Beat my dissertation hands down. So it was just a 10,000 word essay about certain topics, and, you know, there's only so much. Yeah, there's so much you can read and you know, put down on paper when I'm
That's
not that
awful.
Oh, it was awful. Right, you know, it took me 3 months to write.
That in itself, I find, I mean, I see it, obviously, I'm now got my own business. I freelanced and I worked for a company before that. So I've gone on quite a lot of journey. So a lot of people think I've just arrived here now. And I'm like, no, there's been like a long, I only said to Graham just earlier, for me, I did a PGCE. And I don't think the teaching was that good. I can't even remember it, to be quite honest. And my teaching, I feel, got better when I started teaching other people how to teach, because I really had to look at that. I probably was, I don't know if I'm great now, but, you know, I probably wasn't then, if I'm honest. I don't really know if I knew what I was doing. And one of the biggest things for me was that assessment bit. It was that assessing, you know, for learning. But I do find it really quite surprising, just how, like you said, that's quite a large number of words. The other company I worked for, they broke it down into 3 sections and then various questions. I break it down into lots of smaller questions, because particularly when you're dealing with different levels, that there'd be a lot of people that just wouldn't be able to do that. Not that they don't know the answer, because they do know the answer, but they actually, it's an assessment of how well they can write assignments. That's not actually, like you said, that's not actually what it necessarily should be about. It's about assessing whether you're able to teach, because that's the practical bit, but also, do you have the knowledge to be able to put that into practice?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I think
you told me that, I was like, what?
It was awful to write, you know, and then they did break it down. So it was kind of like, here's 3 sections and you answer all these questions in between, but the total word count had to be somewhere around the 10,000 mark. And, you know, for me, that's great. And I did like a 15-minute session as well of teaching of a topic and the learning points and things. And I kind of got no feedback from that either. And I was like, okay, so I've done this qualification. I've now got this piece of paper that says I can go teach adults. Amazing. And that's kind of all it feels like it is. And that's not enough for me. I want to know that I can go away and teach adults, but know that what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching it impacts and it lands, and people learn something from me.
It's quite I had somebody say to me a while ago, we were sat around, and I knew when they asked the question, I knew what they actually meant. How long will the assignment take to write? I knew what they actually meant was how quickly can I bang that out, was what they actually meant. To which I said, well, you could probably do it in a few nights, but really the learning happens once you finished and you go away after that. That was my point. And my heart sort of falls when I hear that, because, and it doesn't very often, because most people don't leave me thinking that that's just the way it is, because that's not, like you said. I think if nothing else, some people, I do get quite a lot of people, I'll always ask the question about sort of what's their motivation for being there, and some people will be like, oh, I've got to. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. Particularly people that have been teaching for quite a long time, they're a little bit, you're going to bore me. I totally get that. I've got ADHD, and I'm like, if you're going to tell me stuff I already know and you're going to bore me, I'm like out there completely. But what I try to reiterate to people is it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether it's entry level, you've never even stood in front of people, through to already having done it. But the fact is, if you've never actually learned how to put a session together, you've never learned how to put a session together. The same as somebody might actually have watched somebody do what you do. But there's a very big difference between, I could watch and watch and watch and watch and watch and go, I think I can do it because I've watched it enough. There's a big difference between that and then you educating me to be able to do that, because I know why. That's the it's the why behind it. And I suspect for you, the conversations that we've had, it's about you. It's for you. It's about you getting across that why to the people that you're teaching, not just I'm going to tell you this. Because writing an essay, that's great, and it is great knowing the theory behind it. But and I've talked to you about a course that I'm developing that moves on from that, because there is quite a variation with the AET of what people get from that, from people doing it online, completely distance learning, and then doing the micro teach where there's no human input apart from that assessment bit, through to other people that may do it for 3 or 4 days and have someone like me. Quite a big difference.
It's been really interesting, Jodie. I mean, since I've been working with Marianne, I mean, I've deep dived into this whole area of training, etc.
I bore him with it a lot.
Which is really weird, because actually, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, probably the most amount of recommendations I've got from various people over the gamut of my career are for training. And training is something that, has always been a massive part of what I do. But actually, I've got an absolute problem with kind of educationalist, kind of academic type speak, stroke kind of the way everything gets, pushed into this particular way. And I actually said to Marianne just the other day, I said, actually, a lot of the way that people talk about, even now, AET and all of this thing, if you just look at posts on various platforms like LinkedIn about it, seem very kind of educationalist, yes, and quite boring as well. And what I've done looking at it, I've gone, well, actually, this stuff is so useful for so many people, because people do need to be able to teach people really effectively, right? And there's so much bad training out there because people just turn themselves into a trainer, like just literally you go in, you walk into the shop of training, you buy yourself the badge, you stick it on, you get the t-shirt, and there, hey ho, you're a trainer. And then you go out there and you do this rubbish training. But there are people like yourself that really want to do it properly. But not everybody's built the same way. I discovered at university that I did 10. That's the last time I wrote 10,000 words all in one go. Was at university for my dissertation. Absolutely hated every moment of it.
Yeah.
I in my second year at university, whilst I was doing my degree, I did my diploma in broadcast journalism, had an epiphany that actually this was a much better way to write, because journalism and decent journalism is all about actually being able to make something complex really simple in as few words as possible, and make it approachable and you know, attainable to everybody. And there we were at university trying to make the most complex of things even more complex in this written form, so that actually only certain people could understand it. To me, it's like biblical time type stuff, you know, where only the certain people in the Bible could actually understand the scriptures. I mean, it's like that, right? And to me, that's totally non-inclusive. It really, you know, it pushes certain people out, and it actually doesn't show anything at all. So I'm surprised by 10,000 words. I mean, I'm glad that you wrote the 10,000 words, but I think the really interesting thing there was that you did it all, and you felt that there was something lacking out at the end of it, which was that no one had kind of helped you then make sense of what you'd already done. So it was like,
yeah, and it was interesting how it kind of came about. So we do have a full team of clinical educators at the company I work for, and you know they've all got vast amounts of experience and knowledge in their field and their expertise, and again, all working in very niche areas. But none of them had this formal qualification of we're all clinical educators, but how are we teaching? You know, and so, you know, the company very, very kindly said, yes, you know, there's qualifications out there. So the AET kind of came up again. I said, well, I've done that, of course, and I've got the certificate that says, yes, I've got a level 3 AET qualification. But then it made me think, you know, well, I've got this qualification. So what's the next step? You know, how do I use it? You know, where does it all kind of come into play? And is it just a tick box exercise at this point? Because for me, I'm kind of like, well, I don't want it to be just tick box exercise because this is my job. So I want to be the best version that I can be teaching. And I think a lot of that comes about who you are as a person as well, and your drives and motivations to do it. Because if you're just doing it for a tick box exercise, what you're teaching out enthusiasm just comes across, and then you're not engaging your room and the topic and it all falls flat.
Were you taught based like by human? Was it online or Zoom? I know it was obviously not face to face because it was COVID, wasn't it?
There was no face. There was nothing. It was literally just
on paper.
Literally, yeah. Here's a package. Go and do it. And if you need any help, give us a call. So I got a phone call from a GP because I was really struggling to get the questions to apply to my area of honestly, of teaching. And I really struggled. They were like, "Oh, just broaden it out," and I was like, "But that's not the point, is it? How do I broaden out?"
Right. It's always going to be frustrating for someone like you. And the other side of it, I find it funny because to be able to teach that qualification, so if to be able to go into a classroom and teach it, you have to have a level 4 above. That's with Highfield. I think some other, it might be a level 3. I think it's different ones. So I find it really, really entertaining, although not really very entertaining hearing your story. You have to have that qualification if you're going to stand in front of a class and teach it. And yet somebody can get a qualification that has had no input from the teaching wise, apart from when you do your micro teach, from an actual human being who is good. Because people say to me, wow, everything that I've got a vast experience. And that's the stuff people learn from as well. Me saying, well, okay, this is the theory stuff, this is how you do this, but me sharing my experiences. And I just really think, well, actually, I commend you for even being able to get that, but also feel a little bit disappointed because it is, as you say, that then just becomes a tick box. So it's things like, you know, we've talked at length, we did end up talking at length about competencies.
So, that word.
Wonderful. So anybody that works in the health and social care sector will be particularly interested in this. And we talked about it on the AET that I delivered the other week because it just so happened it was all people that worked in the care sector. And particularly, so Paula that's been on this before, Paula Cashmore, and we've had many a conversation about, she was saying about doing the AET and whether she felt that she should, which is, you know, fine, because people say, well, even if I learn how to teach, how do I know that what people are doing is right? And when I get in trouble if somebody does something wrong. So I said, well, you know, to look at that bit first, it would have to be absolutely proven that what you taught them actually caused an accident or something like that, which it would be very, very highly unlikely that that would happen. But so long as I said you're competent, so it should be that you're competent at what you do, then you can teach that. Well, of course, we go down the whole area, which is what you've said you've had. I don't say, well, I suppose it is issue, as in that it's a problem for you. When you're, I think, particularly for someone, I say like me, and I do think being neurodiverse, I need to know where things sit. So
Yes,
how am I going to say that what you have done? So if I'm teaching A level, I've got a set of criteria, and I can say, right, okay, so I've marked you against that. If it's for the micro teach, I've got a criteria I can set against that as well. The problem you've got with the health and social care sector is that, and you can talk about it from your side, is that there isn't a criteria. I set up on my own, and I'm going, okay, when I write my PowerPoints and when I come up with a program, what criteria am I using? To which I was met with a deathly silence because there wasn't one. And then I'm saying, well, how can we actually, how can we check for competency? And then we say, well, who's checking? The person that's checking competency, how are they checking competency? And that's where there's quite a difference that I've seen from other sectors I work with, that people are quite shocked that there just isn't anything. So I said, if I'm teaching moving and handling, arguably there should be levels that you take an off-qual regulated qualification that's actually fit for purpose, and you can say, right, okay, somebody has done that qualification, which means that, and the person above has, the same as with me, I've got to have a higher qualification. But there isn't any of that out there. And so you were saying the same thing, weren't you, about for you?
Yeah. So competency is a word that comes up all of the time, and it's kind of a word that if you work in the health and social care sector, you will know about. Absolutely. But again, I'm very much like yourself. I like to kind of understand whys, and I like to get all my ducks in one basket in a row so I know exactly where I'm going with it. And I think this might touch on what you were talking about, Graham, as well, is in this particular setting, have we created this unattainable environment to achieve learning? There's so many people who are scared to teach or to learn, which is then having this massive impact on people's ability to gain competence in certain things. So, like, again, my area being very niche, I'll take it. So there are acute guidelines and lots of evidence and lots of research about it, and even some national guidance from the National Tracheostomy Safety Project. And everybody kind of follows their lead on things, which is great for the acute side of things. But when you've got a care home in the community or a district nurse team, there are no guidelines. But there are lots of clinicians wanting to build that bridge per se, but don't know how to go about it. You know, and I'm part of a working group at the moment, which are talking about that. And the first thing is, we need an organisation to drive this forward. And it's like, so where do we go? Who do we ask? You know, and then it's all these questions. But I think one of the big things is, why are we in this position in the first place? Why are we having to kind of do all of this? And the big thing is competence. We want to send these complex patients, in whatever sector it is, to an area where they're going to be cared for, they've got safe, effective care, but we're not willing, and I say we, as in the NHS and clinicians at some point, abroad, whoever it be, whatever environment you're in, not willing to give people the tools, the knowledge, the skills, the confidence to achieve that, but still have that expectation. And that's my issue at the minute. I'm kind of a little bit like, does everybody really understand what competence is? Who gives it? Who signs it? What does it mean? How long does it go?
And where is it? And again, we had this conversation about, surely it can't, I mean, I'm not saying like in one afternoon, but it can't be that difficult to be able to. This is what I've said about with CQC. CQC say it's not there. And I will, and I'd invite them to talk to me, because I've asked to talk to them as well. And then they you know, often say that it's not there, it's not up to them because they are regulators. Yes, but if you come in and then you fault care settings for their training, well, you can't fault for somebody for something if you haven't laid out somewhere. And as you said, I can't really understand that the same as I've been dealing with the fire service is saying that, you know, they've got what will happen is somebody will fall in a care home. Let's just say somebody will fall and the carers will say, I can't pick them up. I can't get them up. And I'm saying, well, that's not actually strictly true. Nobody's taught me to pick them up. I said, come on, you're not going to be taught. Somebody just doesn't fall perfectly in the middle of a room. You have to use that knowledge and those skills and justify why you did what you did. So long as you can justify with those knowledge and those skills, you should be able to justify. So then what's happening is the ambulance service are often called to come out. They then say, well, we can't get them up either. And then the fires, I kid you not, this is happening out there a lot. Really, that's what I said. As soon as Jodie said to me, she said, you know, I want to be, I mean, for me, it was amazing knowing that somebody wants to actually improve. So wanting to, I suppose, change up their training as well. I think that's it. Because a lot of people say, oh, I've got my AT now, which in all honesty, I've got slight issues with it because I think there's big variations in terms of what would be what would pass and what wouldn't, and as I've just always I talked to you about. And then I said to you, well, there's a next level up that you can do, which is the level 4, and then I'm developing a course which I spoke to you about, which actually felt for me it would be perfect for someone like you. But to know the competency bit, the reason why, so you talked to me about that, but you also talked to me about the learning bit, which kind of all comes in together, because how are you going to assess for learning? I think that's what you were saying, and that's quite a big thing for me. Even people that have been teaching a long time, so the people that I had last week they've been trainers for quite a while, and it will go on my gravestone about aims and objectives. Because it is a big thing, because that's the bit that it doesn't have to be that complicated. And I had to eat my own words this morning when I spoke to Graham about me writing my own stuff and saying, you know, I know that it's the PowerPoint stuff. I start making that a bigger deal than it needs to be, but really it doesn't, because I've done the groundwork that's taken me weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, which was actually working out what do you want them to learn. What do you want them to actually be able to do at the end? And people go, well, I'm going to talk about this. I go, no. Not what are you going to talk about? Before you go anywhere with anything, you've either got to know what your aim is and then come up with the objectives, or you've got your objectives, which is often for me what I have. So if I'm developing something that's an accredited qualification, then I would already have those. So arguably it's a lot easier, which is why I get why you get the frustration, Jodie, because I've just been writing my own course and I've been looking over my shoulder going, there's nobody to tell me what those objectives are. So I had to come up with them myself. And that was a very weird, it felt like something I had to really commit to it. I mean, it came from years of asking other people what they felt that they were lacking and stuff. So it is very weird then when you either have come from that academic background, and there's fault at that too, or you're somebody that needs that absolute to be able to say, yes, you are this, or no, you're not competent. And it is very, very frustrating, and it really needs to. And like you said, when you said about different working groups, and it feels like to me, some grown-up or somebody needs to stand up and go, well, I'm going to be in charge of all this. Because all that happens is everything just gets pushed under the table, so it will just push over there and don't worry about it, it'll be okay. And like you're saying, well, actually it's not okay, because you've got people out there, and what you said to me was, I want the people I teach to be more confident at doing what they do. And the way we feel confident quite often is by being told you're competent.
Yeah. Yes. I'm going to big up Marianne at this point, okay, and make her feel even more confident about this course, which she's been writing for ever and a day, which we're finally about to get out there. I think the reason that is the course for you, Jodie, and also people like yourself as well, is I think we need more courses like the one that she's been developing, which makes sense of a course you've already done, right? Because I think half the problem with a lot of, and I think you mentioned it yourself, half the problem with a lot of courses that we put out there they are delivered and disseminated in such a way that they are a tick box exercise, and therefore you complete them, you have them, you've got the piece of paper, but now you don't know what to do with it.
What do I do with it?
In a way, or what you've learned from that, how that then comes into practice. So I think, having people like Marianne developing a course where it makes sense of what you've already learnt and allows you to apply it a bit more is really important. And actually, I'll take us all back towards the beginning of this conversation, where I heard the words that when I started teaching, that's when it kind of teaching then made more sense to me. I think we've all of us that are a certain way, that makes sense to all of us. I can tell you, when I first started doing radio, I completely sucked, right? Because the people that were teaching me were rubbish, absolutely rubbish. It wasn't until I started, I joined an organisation called the Festival Radio Association, and along the way worked with some lovely people, including the wonderful Simon Mayer. And through doing that and teaching youngsters how to do radio, my radio skills improved no end. Right?
It's interesting.
Yes, because actually, having to explain it to people, it kind of makes you consider and rethink and reframe what you know yourself, and then where you've got gaps, you can analyze the gaps and you can fill the gaps with knowledge and skills. Yeah,
that's quite often where people that are great at something aren't often actually the best people to teach, because they don't necessarily have those skills. And I quite often joke, because I see what people get paid as trainers, and I think it's not really 2 salaries. And actually, it is a whole separate set of skills to be able to do that. And that's why I think I get quite wound up, and potentially you do, Graham, and maybe you do, Jodie. But when I hear people say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna offer some training," and I'm like, okay, because actually there's a whole world away from offering some training, which often to the untrained person is just people talking about. They might have some skills, and I'm not denying that. I'm not, and that's why people come to me, and I'm like, this is brilliant, because we can work on what you've already got. But what I do is teach them how to build that, so that if it goes wrong, why did it go wrong? What can you do to fix it? The same as I could watch you do. Is it tracheotomy or ostomy?
So it's a tracheotomy, the procedure, and a tracheostomy is what's left.
Okay, so I can watch you do it. I can watch somebody else do a tracheotomy, let's just say, and I can watch it loads and loads and loads of times. But I might be able to do it, but if it goes wrong, I'll go, oh my, I don't know how to fix this. However, if you've got the why behind it, and that's why when people come onto my training, I make that very clear to them that I would be absolutely bored sent if somebody. I know that for me, if I was probably going to go on a course that I thought I knew a lot about already, I might go in there with a bit of an attitude, probably. Whereas that's why I start off straight at the beginning to say, right, this is for anybody. And I will, you can take away from this whatever you need to, whether it's starting from nowhere, which is you're going to come at it from a different point, through to somebody who's done a fair bit, that almost sometimes have to undo some of what they've already done, because actually they fall into bad habits, or people, like we've talked about it a lot, about culture change. People that say to me, but I'm told I have to do this way in my workplace. And I'm like, well, now you might have the confidence with the knowledge behind you to be able to say, well, actually, no, you've told me to do it this way, but can you tell me why you've told me to do it this way? Oh, well, it's always been done that way, is the best one.
Can you tell me why? Oh, I've just always done it that way, or that's just what's in the cupboard, or that's just what's on the shelf, or that's what I was taught. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, well, and I heard somebody say something about, it was about being a disruptor or something like that. as if it was a bad thing. And I thought, no, it's not though. It's not. It's actually just speaking up and asking people to just justify why. Why are you asking me to do it like that? Which is why I think that when you are an educator, and probably, Graham, why you liked and are good at doing that, is because I think when you are a why person, so whenever people say, oh God, my child said why, and I'm like, that's good. That's really good if somebody says why. I think those are the people that make the best teachers, trainers, educators, because when you are teaching, you've got that in mind all the time. Which is why I now say that I educate people. I don't just train them, because I think training people is, that's why so when I was teaching Jo last week, and she'll be working, Dining with Dignity, so working with mainly training carers that work with people that got dementia and during meal times. And I think if people understand why they're being asked to use this procedure or do this or do that, I defy most people to not then use that. But when people just get told, do this, do that, but they don't know why. So for me, before I did my internal quality assuring, I hate doing admin. I hate all of that stuff. But when I actually did the course about it, I then had a newfound appreciation as to why I had to fill in this form or that one.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is, and I want bringing Jodie here. We're short on time, but we'll do this. You said yourself you want to be a super trainer at this. You want to be great at this, and I think there's a couple of things with that. I think if people want to be really, really good at training, one is you always suck at training, right? Because actually you can always be better from where you are. And I think one of the problems that we have with a lot of people is that they get to a certain competency level and they go, right, that's it now. I'm as good as I'm going to get at this. No, you're not. Yeah. You're as good as you're going to be at it today, but actually you can still get better at this. There's always something else you can learn.
When we stop asking ourselves that question, we've got a problem.
You have got
you can always be better.
Yeah. Always be better. And also with that, as you learn and as you ask whys and as you move further up the ladder on that as well, you're probably going to undo what you've already learned, and you'll probably question more because you'll go, now I understand that a bit, but now is that as good as we can get it to be? So you start being more disruptive the further up the ladder you go.
But then there's the other bit, Graham. We talked about this. I was reading something earlier, and it was somebody saying that it annoyed them that somebody responds in a certain way to an email, and that they thought it was really out of order, and it was really slack, and it was. And my answer back was, and it does come into training, to be quite honest, because some people get very set in people that come in. Sometimes will say to me, no, it has to be done this way, and I don't have phones, and I won't have this, and I won't have that, and I'm like, oh gosh, that we live in a really diverse world, and I'm like, well, hang on a minute, you're saying that you don't, if somebody replies to an email in this way or that way, that you're going to bin the email, apparently I read this morning from somebody, and I said, I get what you're saying. I said, I'm a stickler for grammar myself, but equally I make massive typos as well because I'm in a hurry all the time because I want to get that, that out there. And so that's one of the biggest things. I said that this morning to you, Graham, is that when I'm training, we were talking about PowerPoints. How do you write your PowerPoints? Do you, some people like a lot of pictures, some people like a lot of text, some people don't like this color, some people don't like that one. And in the end, you can be. But actually, we said it comes down to just communicating and asking people what works for you, what doesn't, and realizing you're never going to get it right for all the people all the time. But the biggest thing you can do, and it's one of the things I share with people, is to actually say, I might not get this right straight off, but can you educate me? Can you please educate me as to what you want? Because there's any huge number of people out there that I could be teaching, and I don't know what everybody's needs or wants are. So the best thing I can do is be open to working with. So for me, when I'm teaching people, It's not. So somebody I spoke to yesterday said, I don't really like people. I don't get people, and they confuse me. And I just don't know if I'll be any good at training. And I said, but that's the key to it, is you've got to stand there. So when people think I'm just standing talking, it's you're actually getting to know those people, to actually think, okay, well, I think you like it this way. You're not really into that. You're not very confident. So I need to be like this with you. Do you see what I mean? And so it's almost like you can have all of the fancy tech as well. But ultimately, if you don't do that bit, there's always going to be a barrier, to that learning. And from speaking to you, Jodie, I can see already that the sheer fact that you want to will make you always good, because you won't take it.
I don't know. I am that person much like you. I want to ask why. So the fact that you've gone and written your own course because what was out there was kind of this tick box, not tick box exercise, but very structured. It's this and it's this way, that way. And then does it have to be that way? Can it achieve the same thing but not be judged on the journey to get there? That journey looks different, and that's something that kind of comes up a lot. I say, don't judge me on my journey, on how I got there, my processes. Judge me on the end and the outcome and what I've achieved. Because all the time we're told that this has to be done this way and maybe, for whatever reason we don't feel confident or comfortable or don't like confrontation as we perceive it might be, to go, well, actually, why is it this way? Can you explain it to me? And a lot of that's about how you ask that question, which sometimes is tricky and sometimes is less tricky, but do you feel confident and comfortable enough in yourself to say, well, actually, can I ask you why? And I'm not trying to.
I think that's why. So for me, I knew that there's a qualification above, which I'm not going to diss it as such, but I'm never going to get somebody to do something that I don't feel is going to do the job that they need it to. Trainers don't have people working, they don't have time. People have to write, you have to write lengthy essays for these qualifications. And to me, if you don't need that, which is why I've written something that is actually going to be helping, it's a bit like lots of workshops, actually. That's a lot of what it is. And so it gives people like you, let's just say, a chance to go, okay, well, I've got the basics. I want to have a go at this. So let me have a go. So that's part of the course. And I'm going to put that into practice, not getting people to do meaningless essays that don't go towards anything really, that we don't have time to do.
And that's it. That's the shift. That's that's being adaptable and again, being a good educator, you're kind of adapting what the norm looks like and making it accessible for more people, and that's important. I think particularly any part of training. So if we take clinical training, for example, a lot of that's mandatory topics that you have to do every year, and it becomes I've got to do this again, or I've got to do that again, and it's boring to them. They're already coming into that session going, I just have to do this. Yeah, and it's boring for them. They don't want to be here. So that's kind of when you're doing a session and a training, the first thing I ask, because I know they have to be here and I know they've already got some experience in it, is what do you want to take away from today? Tell me one thing you want to learn, because then I'm not spoon feeding them, and I've set the expectation that I'm going to give you that information that you want to learn, or go away feeling with that. And a lot of it is I want to feel more confident. So they've got the knowledge, but they want to feel more confident in what they're doing. So again, it's just adapting to all that and thinking about the context of the training that we're delivering and what is its purpose and what we're trying to achieve and what do we want people to go away with the take-home message. So again, always being better, because those posts and things are always shifting.
And that is a brilliant place to leave it today. Thank you so much, Jodie, for coming and talking to us. We could talk forever, but I have to pick the kids up, so that's going to draw it to an end. Thank you. If you've enjoyed that at home, sitting there listening, perhaps you've been through training yourself. You thought it was okay, but a bit of a tick box affair. You want to know a little bit more about Marianne's course that she's developed, do get in touch. If you want to know more about having your throat split open in the correct way, probably best to talk to Jodie about that, because she's the expert. All right. Until next time, we hope you'll join us again next week for more of the same. Until then, bye for now.